April 29, 1945. Southern Germany. American boots crush the gravel on the outskirts of Munich. The war is ending. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler is underground, hours away from suicide. But for the men of the 45th Infantry Division, the nightmare is starting. They are moving toward a location known as Dachau. What they find there will push soldiers to commit acts they will never mention again. The smell hits them first. It carries for miles before the camp is even visible. A heavy, sickening stench drifts on the spring air. It is the smell of decomposing human flesh. Thousands of bodies are rotting in the German sun. The 45th Thunderbird Division has been in combat for 511 consecutive days. They landed in Sicily in July 1943. They took Palermo. They fought their way up the Italian peninsula step by step. For 135 days, they were trapped at Anzio. German artillery rained down 24 hours a day. They watched friends disintegrate in foxholes. They pushed through southern France, smashed the Siegfried Line, and crossed the Rhine. The casualty rate for this unit is nearly 75%. 3 out of every 4 men who started with the division are now dead or wounded. The survivors have seen every possible way a human can die, but nothing has prepared them for the end of this road. At first glance, it is just another objective, but in reality, it is a factory of death. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks is 28 years old. He leads the 3rd Battalion of the 157th Infantry Regiment. His orders are direct: secure the concentration camp at Dachau. The officers look at their maps. The soldiers check their rifles. At this moment, no one truly understands what that order means. The footage from the era shows the soldiers' faces. They are hollow and exhausted. They march past abandoned rail cars. The camera pans over the rusted steel of the tracks. This was not a battlefield. It was something else. How did the guards respond? They expected the rules of war to protect them, but the Americans were no longer following the manual. The sight of the charcoal-colored uniforms made the soldiers reach for their triggers. Events accelerated. The battalion reached the perimeter. The sound of heavy iron gates swinging open is audible. The soldiers stop. No one dares to breathe. The air is thick with ash and silence. There was no turning back. Thus began the liberation. April 29, 1945. The term concentration camp does not yet carry its historical weight. For Lieutenant Felix Sparks and the men of the 157th Infantry, Dachau is just another coordinate on a map. They are clearing objectives. They expect a garrison, a firefight, and a surrender. Then they reach the rail siding near the camp entrance. 39 railway cars sit motionless on the tracks. The soldiers approach the first boxcar. Sparks steps forward and looks through the slats. He immediately turns away and vomits. The interior is packed from floor to ceiling with naked corpses. These are emaciated bodies, skin stretched over bone, stacked like cordwood. The details are visible in the sunlight. Some victims have their eyes open. They are frozen in the middle of a final scream. On the gravel below the doors, brain tissue lies mixed with dirt from crushed skulls. Decomposition is everywhere. Some died days ago. Others have been rotting for weeks. Thousands of maggots move through the gray flesh. The stench hits the unit like a physical blow. Private First Class John Lee is a veteran of the Italian campaign. He has seen heavy combat. He stares at the pile of limbs and begins to shake. He starts to cry. Other soldiers stand motionless. Some men curse under their breath. Most are silent. They stare at the empty eyes of the dead. What was this? It was the death train from Buchenwald. It departed on April 7th with 5,000 prisoners. The trip to Dachau should have taken 3 days. Instead, the locomotive meandered through Saxony and Czechoslovakia for 3 weeks. The conditions inside were calculated. No food was provided. No water was distributed. The SS packed the cars so tightly that no one could sit down. By the time the wheels stopped at Dachau, 2,310 people were dead. The causes of death are clear: starvation, dehydration, typhus. Many were simply trampled underfoot or suffocated in the crush. The SS guards did not remove the remains. When a car became full of corpses, they forced the living to stand on top of the dead. Multiply this scene by 39 cars. Over 2,000 decomposing bodies are twisted into impossible shapes. Most are completely naked. The soldiers have not even reached the camp gates yet. Lieutenant William Walsh leads VAR Company. He is 25 years old. He has spent 500 days in active combat. He believed he understood the limits of human cruelty. He believed he had seen every possible horror of war. The sight of the train destroys that illusion. Something inside Walsh breaks. The survivors are still inside the camp. April 29, 1945. I Company moves past the stationary train. 4 German soldiers emerge from the thick woods. One of them holds a white handkerchief high. They are surrendering. These men are SS. The runes on their collars and the specific cut of their uniforms make it clear. Lieutenant Walsh stops. He looks at the soldiers. Then he looks back at the boxcars. He sees the thousands of corpses. Men, women, and children are stacked inside like common refuse. Walsh makes a decision. He does not call for a transport detail. He orders the 4 SS men into an empty boxcar. Walsh climbs in after them. He draws his pistol. He pulls the trigger until the magazine is empty. The Germans are hit but not dead. They scream in agony. They beg for mercy in German. Private Albert Pruitt watches from the tracks. He climbs into the boxcar. He does not say a word. He moves methodically. Pruitt fires a single shot into each man's head. The executions are complete. 4 surrendering soldiers are dead in a car filled with their own victims. But this was only the beginning. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks pushes his battalion deeper into the camp complex. What they find defies logic. The main camp holds over 30,000 prisoners. They are walking skeletons. Most weigh less than 80 pounds. Their eyes are sunken deep into their skulls. Their skin hangs off their frames like loose gray fabric. Many cannot stand. Thousands more lie exactly where they collapsed. They are in various stages of decomposition. The living and the dead occupy the same barracks. Some bodies have been there for hours. Others have been rotting for days. No one had the physical strength to move them. The smell is a physical wall. It is the stench of human waste, typhus, and rotting flesh. Sparks reaches the crematorium. The camera would show rooms filled floor to ceiling with naked corpses. The piles are so high the ceiling is invisible. The coal-fired ovens are still warm to the touch. Inside, the steel doors are charred bones and half-burned torsos. The SS ran out of coal before the Americans arrived. Next to the ovens is a gas chamber. It is disguised as a shower room. More bodies wait outside the door. Sparks would later write that Dante's Inferno was pale compared to this reality. How did the soldiers react? At first glance, they were liberators. But in reality, they were reaching a breaking point. These men of the 45th Infantry Division had a history with the SS. It began in December 17, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge was in full swing. Near the town of Malmedy, SS troops forced 84 American prisoners into a snow-covered field. They opened fire with machine guns. This was not combat. It was an execution. News of the massacre reached American lines within hours. It spread through every foxhole and command post. The reaction was immediate. An unofficial policy took root among the frontline divisions: take no SS prisoners. If a regular Wehrmacht soldier raised his hands, he went to a camp. If an SS soldier tried to surrender, he was often killed on the spot. This wasn't a formal order, but everyone understood the shift. The rules of engagement had changed. The 45th Infantry Division already had a reputation for this kind of violence. 1943, Sicily. During the Biscari massacre, men from this unit killed 73 Italian and German prisoners of war. General Patton tried to downplay the incident. Court-martials were held, but the charges resulted in little punishment. The soldiers learned a specific lesson. In this war, some crimes went unpunished if they were committed against the enemy. Now, these same men are standing inside Dachau. They see the piles of bodies. They smell the stench of the crematoriums. They are surrounded by evidence of industrialized murder. The unofficial rules of the 45th Division are about to be applied with extreme prejudice. At the main entrance, Heinrich Wicker waits. He is an SS Untersturmführer, only 23 years old. He has been ordered to surrender the camp to the Americans. The high-ranking officers are gone. Commandant Martin Weiss fled 48 hours ago. He took the experienced guards with him. Wicker is left holding a white flag and a list of 560 men. The troops under Wicker's command are not the veteran camp guards. Most of the original staff vanished into the woods days earlier. These new men are a mix of the wounded, the sick, and prisoners from the SS disciplinary system. Many are Hungarian Waffen-SS recruits. They do not speak German. They arrived at Dachau only days before the Americans. To the soldiers of the 45th, these details do not matter. They do not see individual histories. They see the lightning bolts on the collar tabs. To the Americans, every SS uniform represents the same evil. The distinction between a veteran guard and a new recruit has vanished in the smoke of the camp. Lieutenant Walsh moves through the camp interior. He is not looking for survivors. He's organizing a roundup. His men are dragging prisoners out of barracks and guard towers. Walsh begins a selection process. He separates the captives into two distinct groups. The regular Wehrmacht soldiers are herded into one corner of the yard. The SS men are forced into another area against a long masonry wall. Roughly 60 SS soldiers are lined up. The sound of heavy boots on gravel fills the air. American soldiers are setting up Browning machine guns on tripods. The soldiers of the 45th are no longer taking statements. They are preparing for a different kind of conclusion. Thus began the transition from liberation to execution. April 29, 1945. 122 SS guards are rounded up inside the Dachau concentration camp. Many are already wounded. Some are visibly sick. American soldiers march them toward a coal yard near the back entrance. The Germans are lined up against a masonry wall. Lieutenant Colonel Howard Walsh calls for a machine gun. Lieutenant Daniel Drain from M Company responds. He brings a .30 caliber machine gun team to the yard. The SS men stand against the wall. Their hands are raised or locked behind their heads. They recognize the situation. Some beg for their lives in German. Others remain silent and motionless. Private William Curtin takes his position behind the weapon. He sets the tripod and aims the barrel directly at the line of men. Walsh stands just feet away. The historical record of the next few seconds is divided. Walsh later claimed he only ordered Curtin to fire if the prisoners rushed the line. Curtin testified differently. He reported that Walsh shouted a direct order, "Let them have it." Curtin pulls the trigger. The heavy machine gun thunders, the sound trapped and amplified by the coal yard walls. The line of SS men is shredded. Bullets tear through wool uniforms and flesh. Bodies slam back against the brick and collapse into piles. Blood sprays across the gray concrete. The burst lasts 10 seconds. The gun jams or the belt runs out. The yard falls quiet, but the killing is not over. Many Germans are still alive. They crawl through the dust or writhe on the ground. American soldiers from I Company move forward. They carry carbines, rifles, and pistols. The soldiers walk among the wounded. They fire single shots into the heads of the survivors. It is methodical. Lieutenant Jack Bushyhead, the executive officer, joins the execution with his pistol. The coal yard is no longer a holding area. It is a killing floor. Felix Sparks is in another part of the camp. He hears the distinctive rhythm of the gunfire. He knows the difference between a skirmish and a massacre. This is execution fire, controlled, sustained. He runs toward the noise. The scene stops him at the entrance. 16 SS men lie dead or dying against the wall. A thick pool of blood spreads across the floor. Gunsmoke hangs in the still air. His own men are still standing over the Germans, finishing them off at point-blank range. Sparks draws his pistol. He does not aim at the enemy. He fires 3 rounds into the air to break the trance. "Cease fire!" he screams. He repeats the command until the men turn around. Sparks physically kicks Private Curtin away from the machine gun. The soldiers slowly lower their weapons. Their faces are dazed. Sparks looks at the row of corpses. At least 16 are dead. More are wounded and bleeding out. Was this a war crime? Legally, yes. Sparks knows the regulations. His men know the rules of engagement. But 30 minutes earlier, these soldiers had walked past train cars filled with thousands of rotting corpses. They had just entered rooms where civilian bodies were stacked to the ceiling. In the coal yard, the law of the battlefield had been replaced by the law of the camp. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The air in the coal yard is thick with the smell of the crematorium ovens. Lieutenant Howard Buchner, the battalion surgeon, arrives at the scene. He is a medical officer. He carries a black bag. He has taken the Hippocratic Oath to preserve life. The footage would show 16 SS soldiers sprawled against the brick wall. Some are dead. Others are twitching, their limbs jerking in the dust. Buchner walks toward them. He stops. He looks at the open wounds and the shredded uniforms. He does not open his bag. He does not check a pulse. He turns around and walks away. Later, his testimony will be blunt. He provided no aid and examined no one. The doctor chose to let them bleed, but the coal yard was only the first site of the massacre. At Tower B, 17 more SS men are lined up. The official reports offer conflicting stories. Some documents claim the Germans tried to run. Others say they stood still. Signal Corps photographers captured the aftermath. The photos tell a different story. The bodies lie in a neat row, hands still raised in surrender. Near another guard tower, more executions follow. Investigators will later label these deaths as completely unwarranted. There was no mistake. The killings were systematic. Then, the gates of the camp opened. The inmates of Dachau were no longer prisoners, but they were not yet citizens. They did not want food or water first. They wanted blood. Many American soldiers did more than just watch the violence. They provided the tools for it. The hunt began. SS guards stripped off their black tunics and tried to hide in striped prisoner rags. It didn't work. The inmates had memorized every scar and every facial feature of their captors. When they spotted a guard, they swarmed like a hive. In one corner of the camp, 2 prisoners corner an SS man. One of them holds a heavy iron shovel. A group of American GIs stands 5 feet away, smoking. They do not move. They do not shout orders. The shovel blade hits the guard's head with a wet thud. It rises and falls until the skull collapses. Brain matter and blood spray onto the dirt. The Americans turn their heads, but they do not stop the swinging metal. It got worse. Nearby, a prisoner finds a trooper hiding in the shadows. The inmate begins stomping on the man's face with heavy boots. An American soldier watches the rhythm of the boots hitting bone. He speaks one sentence to the prisoner. "You've got a lot of hate in your heart." The prisoner nods. He doesn't stop. He continues until the guard's face is a flat red pulp. The soldier walks away. Why did the officers allow this? They had seen the gas chambers. The sight of the dead had replaced the rule of law. 3 young Jewish men approach an American chaplain. They are shaking. They tell him they found a sadistic guard hiding in a nearby barn, dressed in peasant clothes. They beat him to death with rocks in their bare hands. The chaplain listens. He takes a note in his logbook. He files no charges. He lets them go. Rabbi Eli Bonin, an American military chaplain, records another scene. An emaciated prisoner, a man who is little more than a skeleton, shuffles toward a dead German. He unzips his pants. He urinates on the dead man's face. He does it slowly and deliberately. The rabbi watches the entire act and says nothing. The violence reached a level of pure brutality. Rabbi Max Eichhorn later gave testimony about guards being beaten until their bodies literally tore open. Their internal organs spilled onto the ground, while Allied soldiers stood in a circle and watched the spectacle. How many died? No one has an exact number. The official Army report by Lieutenant Colonel Walter Fellens lists only 17 killings. In reality, the number was much higher. The bodies were removed at night. American troops opened fire. Felix Sparks estimated 30 to 50 people died during the initial chaos. Later investigations narrowed the numbers. Data suggests American soldiers killed 35 to 40 prisoners of war. But the violence did not stop there. Liberated inmates took their own revenge. They killed between 25 and 50 of their former captors. The final count reached 60 to 90 dead. It was a massacre. It was a war crime. What makes this darker? The SS men executed at Dachau were not the primary monsters. They were not the guards who managed the camp for 12 years. They did not operate the gas chambers. They did not conduct the medical experiments. They did not beat the prisoners to death. Those men were gone. The footage from those days shows empty offices. Commandant Martin Weiss fled. Senior SS officers fled. The veteran guards who knew every inch of the camp disappeared into the woods days before the Americans arrived. Who remained in the coal yard? Most were Waffen SS soldiers transferred from the Eastern Front. They arrived just days earlier. These men had been fighting the Soviet Union in the mud and snow. They were sick, they were wounded, they were exhausted from years of combat. For them, a transfer to Dachau seemed like a reprieve. Surrendering to Americans was a better fate than facing the Red Army. They thought they were safe. Instead, they walked into a trap. They were executed for crimes they did not commit because their uniforms marked them as guilty. But the history of the camp remains undeniable. Between 1933 and 1945, 188,000 prisoners entered the gates. At least 41,000 died inside. The causes were varied: starvation, typhus, torture, and overwork. In the final months, the situation turned into a nightmare. Between January and April 1945, 11,000 people died in the main camp alone. When the Americans arrived, the death rate reached 200 people every day. Dachau was the beginning. It opened just 5 weeks after Hitler took power in 1933. It was the prototype. The SS used Dachau as a training ground for brutality. They perfected torture techniques and systems of psychological control here. These methods were then exported to Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and Bergen-Belsen. Dachau also pioneered the use of humans as laboratory animals. Dr. Franz Blaha, a Czech physician and prisoner, later testified at Nuremberg. He saw the doctors in action. They wanted to know how long a human could survive in freezing water. They submerged inmates in ice for hours. Out of 300 victims, 90 died of heart failure. The experiments continued. Doctors infected prisoners with malaria. They locked men in glass cages filled with thousands of mosquitoes. They forced inmates to drink nothing but seawater to see how long the kidneys would last. The sound of the coal yard execution was just the final note in a 12-year symphony of horror. Thus ended the story of Dachau. 200 inmates. That was the number of human test subjects forced into high-altitude pressure chambers. The scientists watched through thick glass. They increased the pressure until the prisoners' lungs literally exploded inside their chests. 80 people died instantly during these sessions. The survivors fared no better. Dr. Blaha testified about the routine. He saw prisoners shot in the back of the neck, guards loaded the bodies onto stretchers and carried them directly to the crematorium. Blaha performed the autopsies himself. He documented the execution of women. The methods varied. Some were hanged, others were shot. Many received lethal injections. Some of these women were pregnant at the time of their death. Why were they killed? Often, it was simply to clear the records. Just before liberation, the night and fog prisoners were liquidated. These were people kept in total isolation from the outside world. They were executed in a single mass action. Blaha examined the corpses. Every single one had a bullet hole at the base of the skull. Conditions inside the barracks were stagnant. The rooms were packed so tightly that cleaning was impossible. For months, no one had access to a bath. The latrines were overflowing and useless. Medicine did not exist for the inmates. But there was a contradiction. After the camp was liberated, soldiers searched the SS hospital. They found massive stockpiles of medicine. The supplies were sitting on shelves while thousands died of preventable disease just meters away. The cruelty began at the gates. New arrivals were forced to strip. They stood outdoors entirely naked for 6 to 10 hours at a time. It did not matter if the ground was covered in snow or baking in the summer sun. They simply waited until the guards were ready. The scale was massive. Between 1942 and 1945, 7,000 prisoners underwent medical experiments. At least 200 German doctors operated across the camp system. They ignored screams. They ignored agony. This was a state-sanctioned program. The SS administration approved every procedure. They signed the orders. They reviewed the results. It was a bureaucracy of torture that lasted for 12 years. Then, the Americans arrived. The soldiers walked through the gates of Dachau. They saw the piles of bodies. They smelled the crematoriums. They saw the evidence of systematic murder. Then, they saw the SS guards standing there in clean uniforms. Was a violent reaction inevitable? At that moment, some soldiers snapped. May 2nd, 1945, 3 days after liberation, the reckoning began. May 3rd, 1945, Major General Arthur White, Chief of Staff for the 7th Army, initiates a formal investigation. He selects Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Whitaker for the task. Whitaker is 41 years old. He is a lawyer serving in the 7th Army's Assistant Inspector General's office. Whitaker arrives at Dachau on May 3rd. He begins a forensic sweep of the coal yard. The camera records his process. He takes still photographs of the brickwork. He measures the angle of bullet trajectories. He bends down to collect spent brass from the dirt. He finds .45 caliber shell casings. These came from American pistols. He finds heavy scarring from machine gun fire on the walls. The bullet holes provide the evidence. They are clustered at chest height against the back wall. This proves the SS men were standing still when hit. They were not rushing forward. They were not attempting to escape. Whitaker begins the interrogations. He interviews 22 soldiers under oath. The list includes high-ranking generals and low-level privates. He questions everyone who saw the bodies or heard the shots. The sound of a typewriter recording their words fills the room. The result is a documented picture of chaos and rage. It was unofficial murder. But the stories do not align. Some details are blurred by the heat of the day. Others are blurred by guilt. Some men are clearly protecting their friends. Private Curtin provides his statement. He claims Lieutenant Walsh gave the direct order to open fire. Walsh denies this under oath. Walsh claims he only authorized lethal force if the Germans charged the American line. Other soldiers disagree. They say no formal order was necessary. The word simply spread through the ranks. Lieutenant Bushyhead testifies that everyone knew the plan. The plan was to shoot every SS guard on sight. Private William Competile confirms this sentiment. It was the general feeling among the troops. No prisoners would be taken that day. The testimonies are damning. But the footage of the interviews shows no remorse. The men are not hiding their actions. Many are defiant. They had walked through the barracks of the death camp. They saw the piles of bodies. In that moment, the Geneva Convention did not exist. Military justice felt like an abstract concept from a different world. June 8, 1945. Whitaker finishes the report. The document is titled, Investigation of Alleged Mistreatment of German Guards at Dachau. The conclusions are blunt. At the camp entrance, Lieutenant William Walsh shot 4 surrendered Germans in a rail car. Private Pruitt then stepped forward and executed the wounded. After entering the complex, Walsh and Bushyhead segregated the prisoners. They separated the regular Wehrmacht from the SS. The SS men were marched to the coal yard. They were lined up against the masonry. American troops opened fire. 17 men died instantly. Many others were left wounded in the dirt. Near a guard tower, 7 more Germans were killed. Whitaker marks this as an entirely unwarranted execution. The investigation was over, but the consequences were just beginning. General George S. Patton, Bavaria, 1945. A thick investigation file lands on his desk. The document recommends immediate courts-martial for Lieutenant Walsh, Lieutenant Pruitt, Lieutenant Bushyhead, and Sergeant Wells. The charge: murder and violations of the laws of war. Patton reads the details. He sees descriptions of the coal yard execution. He reads about the boxcar shootings and the summary killings of surrendered men. He knows the recommendations are clear. But Patton makes a choice. He does not tear up the document. He does not burn it. He simply refuses to prosecute. The reasoning never enters the official record. But the context is obvious. Patton had toured the camps. He had smelled the rot. He was under direct orders from Eisenhower to document every atrocity for the world to see. Putting American liberators on trial for killing SS guards was a political disaster he refused to touch. December 1945. The file moves to Colonel Charles Decker. He is the acting deputy judge advocate. The war is over. Occupied Germany is a wreck. In Nuremberg, the major war crimes trials are already underway. High-ranking Nazis are in the dock. Decker faces the same question. Do we punish our own for killing the enemy? December 31st, 1945. New Year's Eve. Decker closes the file. No charges, no trials. His written conclusion becomes the official stance of the United States Army. He admits the shootings violated the letter of international law. He acknowledges the SS guards were killed without a trial. But then comes the pivot. Decker writes that justice and equity do not demand prosecution. He cites the conditions that greeted the first troops. He calls fixing individual responsibility an impossible task. In plain English, it was a war crime, but it was understandable. The investigation ends there. 0 cross-examinations, 0 convictions, 0 days in prison. The Dachau massacre becomes a classified secret, buried in military archives. The soldiers go home. They return to quiet lives in America. Most never speak of the coal yard again. 40 years pass. The silence finally breaks in the 1980s. The veterans are aging. They start writing memoirs. They sit for interviews. The truth leaks out in fragments. Felix Sparks is now a brigadier general. He doesn't hide the facts. He admits his men executed guards. Sparks describes the chaos. He admits he fired his pistol into the air to stop the slaughter. He was only partially successful. His estimate, 30 to 50 Germans died. He offers no apologies. He writes that Dante's Inferno was pale compared to the reality of Dachau. Under those conditions, military discipline didn't exist. Lieutenant William Walsh lives until 2001. He remains defiant until his last breath. In a 1990 interview, his voice is hard. He states that no SS man killed at Dachau wondered why it was happening. He tells the interviewer that if he goes to hell, he'll check if the Germans had any complaints. To Walsh, there was no moral complexity. SS meant death, period. The liberated prisoners saw it differently. Walenty Lenarczyk, a Polish survivor, remembers the moment of impact. The footage of the era shows the scene, prisoners swarming over the wire. They grab the Americans, they lift them onto their shoulders. Lenarczyk describes it as an explosion of emotion. Then comes the revenge. Lenarczyk says the prisoners had been treated like animals for years. On that day, it was their birthday. The prisoners had been starved, beaten, and dehumanized. Now, their captors were begging for mercy. Some prisoners used shovels, some used their bare hands. They wanted blood. But who were the men in the coal yard? Hans Lindberger was a Waffen-SS soldier. He wasn't a camp guard. He had been wounded 4 times on the Eastern Front. He had lost an arm in combat. He arrived at the Dachau hospital on March 9, 1945. He was a disabled soldier waiting for the war to end. April 29th. The Americans arrive. Lindberger walks toward them. He's holding a small Red Cross flag. His empty sleeve hangs limp. He's no threat. But the Americans are carrying submachine guns. They round him up with the others. They march him to the coal yard. The shooting starts. Lindberger is at the end of the line. He falls as the bullets hit. He lies on the concrete, bleeding, as soldiers walk among the piles of bodies. They are firing finishing shots into heads. Somehow, they miss him. He survives the massacre, receives treatment, and eventually testifies to the German Red Cross. Is Lindberger a victim? He wore the runes. He was part of the SS machine, but he had never worked in a camp. He had never operated a gas chamber. He was a combat soldier in the wrong place at the peak of American rage. This is the gray area. Good men saw absolute evil, and it broke them. Imagine being Felix Sparks. You are 28 years old. You have spent 511 days in combat. Most of your original company is buried in Europe. You have seen your friends torn apart. You have killed hundreds of men in battle. You think you have seen everything. Then you enter the gates. You see the death train. 40 boxcars filled with skeletal corpses. You see the ovens. They are still warm to the touch. You see 30,000 walking ghosts. The smell is a mix of human waste, typhus, and burning flesh. It is a sensory overload of horror. Your men start shooting. They aren't following orders. They are reacting to the smell. What do? You try to stop it. You kick the gunners away from the tripods. You scream for a ceasefire. You save some lives, but the ground is already red. Do you arrest your brothers? These men saved your life in Italy. They saved your life in France. They just witnessed the greatest crime in human history. Do you put them in handcuffs for killing the men who built the ovens? Sparks chose his side. He filed the reports, but he never pushed for blood. He lived to be 90 years old with no regrets. In 1986, a new narrative emerges. Battalion Surgeon Howard Buchner publishes a book. He He claims 520 Germans were slaughtered. He blames Lieutenant Bushyhead. He claims it was revenge for the Trail of Tears. The timing is suspicious. Bushyhead had died 1 year earlier. He couldn't defend himself. Historians later point to Buchner's own sworn testimony from 1945. Back then, he only reported 16 bodies. Decades later, the number jumped to 500. Neo-Nazis seized the high number to claim moral equivalence. The data doesn't back it up. German historian Jürgen Seruski investigated the declassified files in 1997. His conclusion, 60 to 90 dead. It was a massacre. It was a war crime. But the 520 figure was a fabrication. The truth was already dark enough. The real scandal is the aftermath. Most of the actual camp guards escaped. Commandant Martin Weiss was caught and hanged, but hundreds of others ditched their black uniforms. They blended into the refugee crowds. They went home and lived in peace. The men who died in the coal yard were mostly hospital staff and late arrival replacements. Today, Dachau is a quiet memorial. 800,000 tourists walk the grounds every year. They see the reconstructed barracks. They see the crematorium. They hear the story of liberation. But the coal yard is usually left out of the tour. The revenge killings don't fit the official narrative. The question remains, if you walked through those gates in 1945, would you have held your fire? Would you have maintained the high ground while standing on a mountain of corpses? Most people would like to think so, but history suggests otherwise. Dachau proves that humans have a breaking point. Proximity to absolute evil acts like a poison. It corrupts the victims. It corrupts the liberators. On April 29, 1945, the SS lost the war. But for a few hours in the coal yard, they succeeded in turning their enemies into killers. The soldiers went home. The survivors scattered. The bodies were cleared away. The files stayed locked for 40 years. No heroes, no villains, just the heavy silence of the coal yard. The story ends here.